Okay, so we will discuss today domain name resolution system, and you are already familiar with the use of different names or identifiers at every layer in the computer network. We are all very familiar with IP addresses. We use them to address machines or address interfaces at the network layer. Likewise, we also have a host name for every machine, and this host name is part of an organization or a part of a domain. And for the purpose of web, we use these host names. We also call them as domain names. The domain names can be used for web servers, or they can be used to name email servers as well. And these host names, as you can see, they consist of multiple sub parts separated with decimal or dot. And so, like for example, www.iitg.ac.in. Here it is shown cs.princeton.edu. There are many such domain names in the world. These are all mnemonic names, variable length, and they are easy to be memorized by human beings, which is why we use them to address machines or to address hosts. If you see in this, it is obvious that there is some structure in these host names. You can see that we are all already familiar with .com. .com stands for companies. Then you have something called .org. .edu stands for educational institutions. So these there is some hierarchy in these names with a purpose. The purpose of using hierarchy is for scalability of the domain name resolution system. And this hierarchy is not arbitrary. It is based on which organizations are using these domain names. And then we also have IP addresses, which also have a structure in them. So they have something called as the network address, and they have something called as the host address, or prefix and then host address. So although these are 32-bit addresses, they again have a structure in them, typically 4 octets, and some octets are reserved for the network part, and some octets are reserved for the host part. Again, there is a hierarchy in them, and this hierarchy is based on the location of the device or the interface and its location with relevant to the organization or with relevant to the routing domain in the context of the global internet. So they cannot be again arbitrary. They have to follow a typical structure. MAC addresses, on the other hand, are also 48-bit addresses, but they are more flat. There is no hierarchy in them, except for the fact that the first 24 bits are reserved or used to indicate the organization which manufactured these NIC cards, and the remaining 24 bits are used for the host part. But there is no need to maintain any hierarchy in these MAC addresses or assignment of these MAC addresses, because we do not use them for any forwarding operation which requires scalability. So the top two addresses, they have a hierarchical assignment, and there is a structure in them which is used for resolving or routing or forwarding or identifying the path to the location which is represented by this address or this identifier. So this hierarchical assignment process again, is done in a particular manner. So these host names are all maintained with some domains, and for each domain there is a registrar. For example, .edu is one of the top level domain, and all the .edu sites are maintained by a registrar. And then the other subdomains within this edu are assigned appropriately, and then there is typically a local administrator who assigns the host names for each of the organizational hosts. Similarly, IP addresses are distributed in a hierarchy. So there is something called as a prefix. So this prefix is the first few bits, or first 2 octets in this case, and these prefixes are distributed by an organization named as ICANN. And then there are regional internet registries and ISPs which are responsible for maintaining these prefixes and allotment and distribution of these prefixes. And within a prefix, the hosts again can be assigned either statically or dynamically by an organization's network administrator. MAC addresses are simply blocks assigned to vendors by the IEEE. And then in this block, again, the adapters are assigned individual addresses or identifiers by the vendor from its particular block. They can be distributed arbitrarily across the world. There is no need to follow any particular distribution pattern in these addresses. Why do we use these two levels of names, and then you need to always have an indirection mechanism between one type of name to the other type of name? For example, you have IP addresses and MAC addresses, so you need again a resolution protocol between the IP address and the MAC address, which is done with address resolution protocol or ARP. Similarly, you have host names and then IP addresses, so we need to again resolve from one form of addresses to the other form of addresses, which is done by the DNS system for us. There are many reasons why we use these multiple layers or sets of addresses. One is because you have to use addressing in each of these layers. So each layer has to have its own address, and then you cannot avoid this as a part of the protocol specification or part of the protocol, headers. So whether these are useful or not, it's a different story. So MAC addresses are used for local forwarding. It's not very scalable to use MAC addresses for global forwarding. IP addresses, of course, are used for forwarding packets between any two machines. And the purpose of host names is that they are names simply for human readability, and they are easy for us to remember and access the host rather than using these IP addresses. The other reason why we use two different types of identifiers at every stage is to give independence for these addresses to change irrespective of the other addresses. So we have some resolution can remain same while the IP address can change. And then there are corresponding protocols which will take care of this resolution. Nowadays, increasingly, there is another use of this name to address mapping for reliability purposes or for better scalability purposes. The same website is being hosted in multiple machines, and each machine could be at different locations. So then you have to have different IP addresses for each of these machines, but you could still indicate the website with a common mnemonic name, like for example, CNN.com or Google.com. Doesn't have to be present at one machine. It can be distributed across different machines with identical content. And the DNS system will take care of redirecting or moving the packets from the source to the destination based on certain criteria. You might also want to have different addresses corresponding to the machines in different places, because you might want to move the content closer to the user. So this is another reason why people or the content providers like CNN.com, Google.com, they tend to use multiple replicas so that they can have each of these replica in different internet service providers or different routing domains, so that it is easy for accessing these replicas from a particular ISP. So for example, all content originating from the India doesn't have to go all the way up to US. It can be served from a replica placed somewhere in New Delhi or Mumbai within a popular ISP of India. So this has several advantages. It reduces the latency. You could also customize it to reduce different content. For example, the CNN.com may be served in Indic languages for people browsing from India. So for that, you need to identify, that the content has to be served from a different replica or a replica which is closer to a particular group of users. This is again, one of the roles of DNS in tandem with the content service provider. We can also have aliases, like in IIT Guwahati itself, we use different names, local name for the web server like shiloi.iitg.ac.in, which is not visible to the outside world. So you can have different names, and these different names again could mean the same, web server or mean the same email server, and they could be resolved to different machines or be resolved to the same machine. So maintaining aliases or different names for the domain name is also one of the functions that can be used if you have different names, different host names for the same machine. In general, DNS, what it does, like every other protocol that I was talking of resolution. So, for example, IP to MAC is done with ARP. So, any one form of name to the other form of name or some value, you can view it at the very high level as a directory service. What does a directory service do? Directory service essentially maintains a key value store where key corresponds to name or some one form of identifier, and value corresponds to another form of identifier or address. In our context, DNS, we can say key is the domain name and the value is the IP address or set of IP addresses. The key value store is maintained at either in a centralized location or in distributed manner across different locations. And the directory service is mainly responsible for answering queries of the type given a name, return the set of addresses or return the address that corresponds to the name. So essentially this particular process of answering a query is called as the resolution. Resolution is a very common term used in networks. Address resolution protocol, for example, resolves IP addresses to MAC addresses. Here in DNS, we are talking of resolving domain name to the IP address. Okay, and then you can also have caching of these responses so that you can reuse them and then you can improve the performance and lower the overhead. Having a directory service also helps the entities, the names and the values to change independent of the each other. So you can update the addresses associated with the same name. You can also change the name without having to worry about how to communicate this to others. You can use aliases to basically change a name to another name temporarily and then get rid of the alias at a later point of time. And of course, caches bring in problems of invalidating or having stale entries, and then you might have to, remove the cached entries. There are three extreme methods which are used, which were used and which are used in the directory design. So the oldest method for storing the DNS entries, that means the domain name to IP address mapping, was the second one, which is basically to push the data to all the clients. So every machine has the list of all the hosts that it need to access. So you will store all the host names and the IP addresses corresponding to these host names in the form of a directory file or in the form of a simple file. So this used to be maintained in Linux machines under the folder /etc/hosts.txt. So this was the oldest method used in late 80s or early 90s before the web became public. It's a easy method to simply store the resolutions in each of the machines. So whenever a machine has to access a domain name, it will look at the host.txt and then identify what is the IP address to which it needs to connect. But then there is a high overhead because you have to distribute this file across different locations, and consistency maintaining is also a tricky issue. This works well only if you don't have too many changes between the host names and the IP addresses frequently, and the number of such hosts is also reasonably small. The other extreme is what is used in ARP. So here, whenever you are trying to find a MAC address corresponding to a particular IP address, you don't have any directory service or any method or somebody that can help you with this resolution. So what you do is simply that you flood this query that, okay, who has this particular IP address, or which interface is assigned with this particular IP address, and you broadcast this query in the entire local area network. And then whichever machine or whichever interface has this IP address, it responds with its MAC address saying that I own this IP address and this is the MAC address of my interface. Okay, and this is what is followed in the address resolution protocol. And naturally, this doesn't work for global scale networks. It works only within the local area network, with, of course, its own disadvantage of having very high message overhead and other issues. Then you could have a central directory service or a server where all the data and queries are handled by one machine, or a group of machine, could be a cluster. And then that single cluster will respond to all the resolution requests globally. Obviously, it is not going to give good performance. It gets overloaded as the number of machines or the number of key value mappings keeps increasing. And reliability is another concern. If this central directory server fails, then you will not have access to the internet. So looking at all these options, the designers of DNS, domain name system, came up with this distributed database implementation in a hierarchical manner consisting of many name servers. Each of these name servers at a level are responsible for resolving the domain name only of that particular level, or the particular subdomain of the domain name system. So DNS has two components. One is that it's a distributed system that implements the resolution process or the directory service with a hierarchy of name servers. Plus, it also has an associated application layer protocol, which we popularly call as the DNS. So DNS, sometimes it's not clear whether you are referring to the protocol or whether you are referring to the system. Both are not independent. You have a protocol for accessing this domain name system, and that protocol itself is also called as the DNS protocol. So this application layer protocol works between the hosts, which are the queryers, which are essentially trying to query for the IP address corresponding to a domain name, and with the set of servers called as the DNS servers, which together do the resolution of the name. That means name translation from the mnemonic domain name to the IP address. Uh, as you all must be aware, this is a very core, internet function. Without DNS, nothing actually would function. You would not be able to access any domain name because we only would remember the domain names. We will not be able to remember the IP addresses. The IP address may not be hosting the website anymore also. While we can always note down the IP address, it may not be having the content anymore. Similarly, mails we always send as user at some domain name like user at iitg.ac.in. And for even finding out the mail server corresponding to the IITG's mailing system, you will have to depend on this DNS. And it is implemented as an application layer protocol because DNS runs over UDP transport protocol. So in that sense, we call it as an application layer protocol, but it is outside all the other application layer protocols. It acts as a supporting protocol for all the other major application layer protocols like web or email. All take the help of this particular application layer protocol for the core function of resolving the domain name to the IP address. And this is one example of having a very complex protocol at the network's edge. And it's not just network edge, but all over the network, you have these DNS servers. What are the services that DNS facilitates? The first main service is the host name to IP address translation. Then you have aliasing. That means to map multiple canonical names or the alias names, and in turn map these alias names to the IP address. Mail server aliasing. So you can also have name associated with a mail server, a human readable name, and then it also translates the mail server's name to the IP address. For example, when you send a mail to user at iitg.ac.in, it might again indicate that the mail server is located in say some machine like patkai.iitg.ac.in, and patkai.iitg.ac.in is located on so and so IP address. So the advantage is that you don't have to change the main mail server name, that is user at iitg.ac.in will always keep working. You may only internally change your host name from Patkai to maybe Shiloi to something else. And this doesn't affect the mail system in general at all. You can also use DNS, as I was mentioning, for load distribution. That means you can indicate one web server name and then you can map it to multiple IP addresses. And these IP addresses can be scattered all across the globe. And you can have a DNS system doing that load balancing for you. So it keeps on shuffling the IP addresses served in a round robin fashion. So it keeps on spreading the web requests across different machines. Why not centralized DNS? For obvious reasons, it would be the single point of failure. That means, if it fails, then nothing else would work. It also probably cannot handle the large traffic volume of modern internet. And so maintenance would also be easy because subdomains and the individual parts of the domain name can be maintained by different organizations. It simply doesn't scale. Just to give you an example from the textbook, I think these are fairly recent numbers. Comcast is a major ISP in the United States. So Comcast DNS servers alone take a hit of about 600 billion DNS queries in a day. Similarly, Akamai is a major content service provider, what people call a CDN. So Akamai's DNS servers take about 2.2 trillion DNS queries a day. So with this volume of queries, there cannot be a single directory service that can scale to this level. So it handles trillions of queries, and then they are physically decentralized, and you have different organizations responsible for their their records. And remember, the performance hugely matters here, because for every web request, you are going to first do a DNS resolution, or for every email that you send, you are going to do a DNS resolution followed by the web connection or the TCP connection. So it has to be done really fast, preferably within in sub-second latency or in millisecond latency. Only then the rest of the internet transactions can work well. And it has to be kept very reliable and secure. That is also one of the requirement. It's not an easy task. People are still learning how to keep DNS secure from attacks. There is no single method which can keep it completely secure. Now we will look at the discussion of the DNS. Any queries? Any doubts so far? Okay, if not, we will then continue. So DNS, as I was mentioning, is a distributed hierarchical database. There are two words in this, distributed, and then the other one is hierarchical. I'll clarify both of these. So DNS, the domain names have a structure in them, and this structure is exploited by the distribution of these databases also. And this database is itself implemented in a distributed fashion. There is no single server which is responsible for again each of these subdomains. So at the topmost level, we have something called as root domain name servers, and then at the next level we have something called as top level domain servers, TLD servers. And then this distribution or this hierarchy continues downwards all the way up to the last level, where we have what are called as authoritative domain name servers. So authoritative domain name servers are the servers which are responsible to maintain the correct IP address mapping corresponding to that particular domain name. So for example, iitg.ac.in would have an authoritative domain name server located at the IITG organization's premise, and that would be the ultimate authority responsible for giving the correct IP address for the iitg.ac.in. And then in between, you may have many one or multiple TLD levels. So for example, if you take iitg.ac.in, you have at least two levels there before the authoritative server is hit. One is corresponding to the .in, and the other one is corresponding to .ac. .in stands for India, and then .ac is for the academic institutions. So we have two levels there. in that case, it is called as TLD and then secondary TLD. So top level domain and then secondary TLD. And then finally, you will have authoritative level iitg.ac.in. Root is like an imaginary, level. It is simply represented as dot sometimes before all these other top level domain organizations. So if client wants IP address for say Amazon.com, first client has to query to the root server to find the DNS server which is responsible for maintaining the records corresponding to the TLD level, that is for .com DNS server. So to even find out .com DNS server, you will have to ask somebody, and that somebody is going to be your root server. Then client queries this .com DNS server to get Amazon.com DNS server, and this DNS server is called as the authoritative DNS server. Finally, client queries this Amazon.com's authoritative DNS server to get the IP address for the website Amazon.com. So DNS root name servers are by official the contact of last resort name servers that cannot resolve the name, and then they will point you to different TLD servers and the other secondary level TLD servers. So the root servers are very important for functioning of the entire DNS system. Internet cannot function without it, and they are normally protected by a security protocol called as DNSSEC. So it would not be easy to modify the records, insert new records, or modify any record inside the root servers. At least they are protected, and then they are also authenticated with security messages and schemes. And this organization, ICANN, which is responsible for assigning the names and domain IP addresses, is also responsible for managing the root DNS domain. There are 13 such logical root name servers worldwide, and each of these servers is again replicated several times based on the load. As you can see, the dark blue colored ones, the countries have more than 21 servers corresponding to each of these root name servers. Those are based on the population or the internet user base. So the root servers then point you to the DNS servers which are responsible for the top level domain names. So these are called as TLD servers. So essentially the root servers would give you the name of the TLD server and the IP address where you will have to contact for the TLD server. And these TLD servers are responsible for all the high level domain names like .com, .org, .net, .edu, and all such top level, also country domain names like .in, .cn, .uk, etc. Yeah, and then the authoritative registry for this .com, .net TLD is one such company called Network Solutions, which will maintain the database for .com and .net TLD server. Educas is the organization that is responsible for maintaining the database corresponding to .edu. So if you have to make any modification to entries in .edu, suppose you want to introduce a new educational institution and you want to create a domain name under .edu, then you will have to contact the registrar corresponding to this TLD, which is Educas. So that's the idea. So for every top level domain name, you will have somebody responsible. Then you will have the last level. If there is no secondary level TLD, then you will go to the authoritative DNS servers, which are organizations' own DNS servers, which are responsible for maintaining all the name mappings. For example, IITG authoritative DNS server would maintain the mapping for the mail server of IITG as well as the web server of the for IITG, and maybe any other host name which needs to be visible from outside. For example, if you want to make your machine be addressed by domain name instead of IP address, you will have to contact IITG's DNS server and ask them to introduce a resource record which will do the translation from your host name to the IP address. And this organization's own DNS servers, whatever they reply, they are considered to be by and large the most authoritative responses, because this is where ultimately the IP address to domain name mapping is going to be maintained, uh, uh, you know, in a most credible manner. Uh, so when a host makes, what happens in the DNS resolution is what we are going to look next. So whenever you make a resolution, so when do you have to make a resolution? Whenever you are trying to access a web server or access any machine, any host with a domain name or mnemonic name. Okay, so the mnemonic name needs to be translated or resolved into IP address. Only then the lower layers like the transport layer and the network layer would be able to function, because they will only function with the IP addresses and not with the mnemonic names. So whenever you will have to convert a mnemonic name to IP address, you will basically start this resolution process. So when host, that is the contacting client, tries to do a DNS query, it is sent to something called as a local DNS server. It is also called as local DNS resolver, because this resolver is what is going to do this resolution on behalf of the individual host. So an organization may have many internal users or internal hosts, and it may deploy one local DNS resolver which will do this resolution on your behalf. It's not necessary. You can also have each host doing the or acting as the local DNS resolver. If you install the DNS daemon in your own machine, then your machine also can work as the DNS resolver. So then this local DNS server starts the query process and finally gets the reply and passes the reply back to the host which is making the DNS query. It could do it from its cache, and if the mapping is not cached, that means if the mapping is not already earlier, it's not requested earlier, it would not be there in the cache. Then this local DNS server forwards the request into the DNS hierarchy for resolution. So we will see how this hierarchical resolution works. So each ISP typically has a local DNS name server. It's not just ISP, and every organization also can have a local DNS server. Like IITG, you must be setting an IP address. If you are on campus, you would be using something like 172.17.1.1, which is the local DNS server, which will do these resolutions on your behalf. Okay, but these local DNS servers don't belong to the hierarchy, because they are the clients which are doing the resolution. In DNS hierarchy, we are only talking of the servers which are responsible for the resolution. So this is also called as default name server, and it is usually near the end host which can use it. And it can be configured either manually or it can be configured via DHCP, typically stored in Linux machines under a file called as resolve.conf, which is under /etc. And the client application which is doing the resolution. So whenever you do, say you type www.iitg.ec.in in your web browser and hit enter, it would invoke the DNS daemon, and the DNS daemon would basically try to extract the server name from the URL and then try to get the IP address by one of these methods, get host by name or get address info, to get the IP address. You would be also using these commands later in your TCP/IP socket programming. So these two methods, which are get host by name or get address info, they are very important because they will essentially invoke the DNS system to start functioning and give you the IP address corresponding to the host name if you are using mnemonic names. If you are directly typing HTTP backslashes and then the IP address, then this is not required. And then the server application is going to extract the client IP address from the socket, and that also uses optionally get host by address to translate into the name. Now we will see two types of resolutions that are used in the DNS. One is called as an iterated query, and the other one is a recursive query. The iterated query is most popular, but the recursive query is also can be used. It is part of the design. So in this example, for example, we are trying to resolve engineering.nyu.edu. machine wants the IP address for gaia.cs.umass.edu. So what it would do is that the requesting host, you can see here, the requesting host at yeah, the requesting host is here, and then it would start resolving the IP address for this particular domain name, and it would contact the local DNS server for this purpose, and the local DNS server would then get in touch with the root DNS server. A root DNS server would only point the local DNS server to the top level DNS server, which is responsible for the .edu sites. All sites under .edu, they are held by the .edu's TLD DNS server, and the root DNS server is basically pointing you to go to the TLD DNS server. Then you will have to, you means the local DNS server again issues a query to TLD server that is shown as the query number 4, and then the TLD DNS server gives a response shown as number 5, which will point you to the authoritative DNS server, which will ultimately give you the IP address corresponding to the the CS dot or gaia.cs.umass.edu. Okay, and so these are basically the steps. You can see that excluding the local DNS server query, there are totally 3 pairs of query responses which are used in resolving the domain name completely. If you have more subdomains like the secondary TLD domains, then you will be using more query response pairs. So this form of query resolution is called as an iterated query resolution mechanism. So in this method, each level's servers would not give you the complete IP address, but they will point you to the next level of DNS servers who can help you with the resolution. So in each of these stages, the query is same. So you are going to query for the IP address corresponding to gaia.cs.umass.edu. So you are directly asking first the root DNS level, what is the IP address for gaia.cs.umass.edu. Then root DNS server would say that I don't know, but you can contact so and so TLD DNS server. So it will give you the name of the TLD DNS server and its IP address. So you will shoot the same query again to TLD DNS server, and that would again point you to the authoritative DNS server. And finally, the authoritative DNS server, when you have queried in the query number, in the interaction number 6 that is shown here, would give you the IP address corresponding to the gaia.cs.umass.edu. And that is passed on by the local DNS server to the requesting host. Okay, so this is the process followed in iterated query. Recursive query is that the root DNS server would then take it on its behalf to do the complete resolution. Instead of pointing you to the TLD DNS server, it would then contact itself the TLD DNS server. TLD DNS server, since it does not have the complete information, would contact the authoritative DNS server. Then authoritative DNS server would give the IP address to TLD DNS server, which in turn sends it to root DNS server, and this gives it back to the local DNS server. So the difference is, as you can see, whether the individual sub levels, subdomains or hierarchical levels in the DNS system, whether they are giving you partial responses or whoever you have queried, it is going to give you the complete response after finding it out from the other levels. That is the difference between these two. Obviously, the recursive query is going to put the burden of name resolution on the first contacted name server, which is the root DNS server. It gives you heavy load at the upper levels of the hierarchy because everybody is going to contact root DNS server, and root DNS server has to get the complete IP address, and only then it has to pass on to the local DNS server. The other danger is, what if one of these query response pair gets lost at any point of time? So if, for example, if the query 3 is lost, then how does the local DNS server know how long to wait for? In the other method, each the local DNS server is basically contacting each level one by one. So it can always resend the query if there is a loss of the query at any stage. Next, we will see what kind of resource records are maintained in the database, which is used in DNS. So DNS names these records as resource records. The resource record format is of name, value, type, and then TTL. TTL it corresponds to the value or duration for which this resource record is valid. Once the TTL expires, then the resource record is going to be removed from the database. So depending on what type of resource record you are storing, the name value is going to change. So the type is going to be different. We'll see a few popular types. The first type is type A, which is the most common one. So in type A resource record, name stands for the host name and value stands for the IP address. So this is what you are essentially trying to query mostly in the DNS when it comes to the web servers, right? So when you are trying to find out the IP address for a web server, this is the type A record is what is going to be relevant. It is also the case for email servers and so on. The other type of resource record is NS, which is what was used in the iterative query when a root server is pointing the resolver to the TLD server. See, root server there doesn't know the doesn't have the type A record, okay, for the UMass machine that you are trying to resolve, but it knows which is the name server which can help you with this resolution. So it basically passes as a response. So you are querying a type A record, but you will get a type NS response, wherein the type NS response will give you the name of the domain and the host name of the authoritative name server for that particular domain. It could be for the TLD or it could be for the last level. So the NS records are what will help you to basically go towards the TLD server. And then the other types of resource records are CNAME, which is used for alias storing or alias resolution. So in CNAME resource record, name is the alias name or the canonical name for the real name, and then value is the canonical name. So here both the name and the value are names. Okay, and then MX record will help you to get the mail server name or the name of the machine which is responsible for the mail server. So for example, as I was mentioning, IITG's mail server may be stored in a machine called patkai.iitg.ac.in, in which case the MX record will point you to Patkai. And along with that, you also need to have the A record. So for both NS as well as MX and CNAME, for all these type of resource records, the query response pair will also need to give you the type A. That means the IP address for the machine to which you are going to send the query. Okay. So, but DNS basically has these 4 major types of records, which is what I wanted to mention. Depending on what type of record you are talking of, the value would essentially change. DNS protocol messages. This is a simple query response message protocol, and the query and the reply messages both are having the same format, the same packet type. Depending on the type of the packet, it determines whether it's a query or whether it is the response. So it has a message header which is used for identifying the message and identifying the duplicates, because you may always have to resend the query. So the identifier helps you to do that. And flag will indicate whether it's a query or it's a reply, and whether you want recursion type or iteration type of query. And it also indicates whether the reply is authoritative or it's a cached reply. Okay, so you can also have caches along the DNS system, which may give you some old mappings which are stored, and that is also indicated with the flags appropriately. Okay, and the other ones are all obvious. So whether it's what type of resource record is being sent and how many resource records are being sent. You can also send multiple resource records in a single response. Okay. If you want to insert any new information into the DNS system, so for example, a new company has been registered. So you first register the domain name, and then after registering the domain name, you will have to register it with the DNS registrar, who is or which is responsible for the particular subdomain. For example, whether you are doing it with .in or you are doing it with .com or .edu, appropriately you will contact the respective DNS registrar and you give all the necessary information like names, IP addresses of the authoritative name server, primary and secondary, and then the registrar inserts this NS records, A records into the corresponding TLD server in this form that is shown here. So you can see here what is the way in which the resource records are stored. So the meaning of the first line is that this is the name, okay, the domain name, and the second one value indicates the name of the TLD server. As you can see, it is an NS record, so that means it is basically pointing you to the name of the machine which acts as the TLD server. Then the second line will give you the actual IP address for that TLD server. So this is the response that comes in the iterated queries when you are asking, let us say, root server. This is the reply that the root server gives you. Okay, it basically sends you to one of the TLD server along with its IP address. It won't give you the final IP address, but it gives you the IP address of the intermediate TLD server. And then you contact the TLD server, and that gives you the next level authoritative DNS servers information, NS record and A record. So automatically, whether a mail client or the web browser, which one is basically trying to do the resolution, that determines whether you are asking for MX record or whether you are asking for the A record. That is how you specify to the DNS server. Okay, and then you also have to create authoritative server locally with all the IP addresses and keep the A record, and if necessary, if you are having mail server, then you can also store the MX records for the necessary servers. Okay, okay, I'll stop here and then maybe we can continue in next class. If you have any questions, any doubts,